Next up in my continuing series of reviewing bands' entire discographies, my personal criteria is it has to be a band, of course, that I really like, but that I bought all their albums, and probably the most important thing is they've been in my life for a long time. Next one up today, Anthrax. I have been into Anthrax from the very beginning. I did these other reviews for Slayer, Motorhead, Faith No More, and Kiss. The only other band that I was into right from their very first album was Slayer. I got into Faith No More on their third album, Motorhead on about their fifth or sixth album, Kiss on their third or fourth album. Anthrax was on the first album I got into them in the summer of '84. I was into around that summer. I've mentioned this before, but there was this new heavy metal, speed metal, thrash metal, and it was I got into Metallica a little bit before that, but it was like Anthrax, Exciter, Raven, I guess bands like that. And Anthrax was one of them. Anthrax was one of the first ones I ever heard, and I remember it was on. There used to be a show on Chum FM. I think it was Chum FM in Toronto called the Power Hour, or one of these late night metal shows, and they played. Metal Thrashing Mad was the first one I heard, and I remember it very well. I used to tape them, and I recorded them, and I wrote them on the tape, and they said it was Anthrax, and I wrote Anthrax, EX instead of AX. I'd never heard, I was like 14 years old, I'd never heard that word before, and so I wrote Anthrax, Metal Thrashing Mad was the first one I ever heard. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Fistful of Metal. The first Anthrax album was called Fistful of Metal. This is one I would normally show you that I have the album, but I don't have that one. Some I've lost over the years. Some when I moved to Mexico, I just didn't bring them with me. I couldn't bring 2,000 CDs with me. But Fistful of Metal was the first Anthrax album, first one I heard. I heard it I guess it was around the summer of '84. I loved it at the time, for me, it was not as good as Show No Mercy from Slayer, which I already had, and Kill 'Em All. But I was 14. If you're a metal kid at 14 in 1984, and an album is called Fistful of Metal, it's got that album cover of the fist, which is weird when you think back of it, but the fist coming, I guess it's coming out of the mouth, and it's Fistful of Metal. It was a cool cover. Cool logo, and they've had that logo for their whole career. But it was never a strong album for me like some of the other ones. Really, I think Metal Thrashing Mad was a great song and still is. I think they've always had that in their sets when they've played. Death Rider was good, the first song, Death Rider. Panic was good. Other than that, I never got too much into it. There was Subjugator, Howling Furies, Across the River, 18, Alice Cooper, the cover. I was never a big Alice Cooper fan, so that song didn't do too much for me. So Fistful of Metal is, like with a lot of bands, their first album. It can either be dismissed, or it can be their best album. For some, you could say Guns N' Roses or Pearl Jam, that it was their best, and they never captured that again. Or with other bands like Anthrax and maybe Red Hot Chili Peppers, maybe the first one, you kind of see they were on the right track, but they didn't quite have it yet. So that's what I think about Fistful of Metal. Not too much to say about that. Now, next was Armed and Dangerous. Now, I remember when they got the new singer, this guy called Joe Belladonna. There used to be a Toronto or a Canadian metal magazine called Metallion. I think it was Metallion, or I think it was, and the writer may have been a guy called Lenny Stout or Lenny Stute. I don't know how you say his name, but they had a news section in this magazine, and I remember in the news it said Anthrax have got a new singer. Neil Turbin was the first singer on Fistful of Metal, and the thing I remember about in this in Metallion was they said this guy Joe Belladonna, they said his voice was described as having the smoothness or the melody of Steve Perry from Journey, and the power of Rob Halford. And they said, couldn't they have done any better? Obviously making a joke saying, wow, they've really found the right singer. So Armed and Dangerous came out, and I love that EP. It just sounded better. I think it sounded, the guitars, everything sounded better than they did on Fistful of Metal. They redid Panic and Metal Thrashing Mad. They re-recorded not just with Joey Belladonna on vocals, but they re-recorded Panic and Metal Thrashing Mad. They did a cover of God Save the Queen by Sex Pistols. The song Armed and Dangerous, which was then on the next record. But it was an EP, I guess, to just let everybody know that Anthrax was still around, and had a new singer. It was a way of saying, I guess, this is what you did in the music industry, I guess, back then. You had to make a statement, so they said, okay, here's, a couple of new songs for now, maybe one new song and a couple of re-recorded songs and a cover, and we've got a new singer, and we're going to put a new album out. Now that album later was, I guess it was later in '85, was Spreading the Disease, and I loved it. That was, for me, they were up. Anthrax was like one of my very top bands at that point with Spreading the Disease. Every song, AIR, and I don't show it, I don't have this one, but AIR, I can remember the track listing. I think Lone Justice was second. I can't remember the track listing. Last song was Gung Ho, Aftershock, Armed and Dangerous again, Stand or Fall. Excellent album. Every song on that album was really, really good, and that was I think a huge step for them. And I still love it. I listened to it maybe about a month ago, the whole album for the first time in quite a few years. I listened to some songs here and there, but that was the first time I had listened to the full album in quite some time. And I think I liked it when I heard it a month ago as much as I ever did, even back then. So for me, Spreading the Disease has really held up. It was also the start of Anthrax having amazing liner notes and packaging of their albums. Of course, I had it on vinyl. And the one side of the inner sleeve was it was a drawing by Charlie Benante. There was Anthrax, like kind of cartoonish figures with a bunch of people behind them, probably some of their images of drawings of some of their friends and things like that. And the album had the lyrics and everything, and it was an excellent album. Gung Ho at that time, it was unbelievable to think that Anthrax was that fast, and that was pure thrash. The last song, Gung Ho, was fantastic. So Spreading the Disease, I love it. I think it's an excellent album. Which leads me to this thing of beauty here. I said this when I did my Slayer video with Rain and Blood, and I said it with Faith No More, I guess with The Real Thing and Angel Dust, and I could do it with Kiss Alive. I could spend half an hour talking just about this album. I will say, I said that Rain and Blood by Slayer is what I consider my favorite album ever. This could be number 2, number 3, 4. It could be number 1. I can't express enough how much I love this album. Everything about it was perfect. And there are a lot of great albums. There are a lot of albums that I would say are among my favorite albums ever. Very, very few. Appetite for Destruction is another one that I would say are perfect albums. Everything about it was perfect. They just got everything, the tone, all of it, the bass, the drums, the vocals, the overall sound of it was just flawless. I couldn't believe when I got this album. I got this, I don't know if it was the very day it came out, but it was very soon. I was anticipating this. I was waiting for this. And it was just so much. At this point in 1987, I was getting to be all about heavy and all about fast. I was, I guess, getting to my peak of thrash metal in around 87. And I couldn't believe how fast and heavy and dark. I mean, Spreading the Disease was great, but it was very melodic. This was just darker, heavier. Among the Living is, I want to say, one of the best album openers ever. Every song, Caught in a Mosh, I Am the Law, NFL, Skeleton in the Closet, Indians, One World, Horror of It All, Imitation of Life. I remember a couple of friends, I had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 good friends. That whole summer of 1987, we just worshiped this album. We were all screaming and yelling at each other because of all the backing vocals on this. Among, and then in Caught in a Mosh, what is it? I ain't gonna let those, every song had these Scott Ian loud barking backing vocals, which my friends and I just couldn't get enough of. We spent the whole summer of 1987 yelling at each other, both from the album and just things we made up. That was the summer of, not the summer of George, but the summer of yelling. It was unbelievable how much I liked this album. And also great, this had the best liner notes, and probably still does, maybe of any album ever, the thank you notes. There were, I remember on the liner notes, there was a picture of them. Something that a lot of bands are doing now on the stage as the show ends with the crowd behind them. Anthrax did that on the inner sleeve of this in 1987. I guess it's still there. Yeah, there it is there. And yeah, there was their thank you list. This was a big deal for me at the time to do this. Now this one on the CD, you need a magnifying glass to read it, but when I had the album, it was great to sit back and listen to this. A perfect, flawless, I can't find a single thing wrong with this album. Just incredible. Everything about it was perfect. I feel like I should say more, but I feel like I'm also being repetitive and redundant at this point. Now the next one, it wasn't an Anthrax album, but I am going to include it. Maybe I shouldn't, and who cares? It was SOD, Stormtroopers of Death, Speak English or Die. And I can't remember if that, sorry, I guess that would have been before. That was between Spreading the Disease and Among the Living. For me, again, I could count, I think SOD, Speak English or Die, that album could be again in my top 10 albums ever. I love that album. It was very funny, but it wasn't a joke album. It wasn't like Steel Panther or anything like that, or, you know, it wasn't Weird Al. It was funny, but it was very serious. The heaviest guitar tone ever, probably the heaviest bass tone ever, so fast. The songs were, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I did want to mention how much I love Speak English or Die. I did that a little bit out of order, and I do have Speak English or Die. This was an executive decision to include it now. Speak English or Die is more or less, to me, an Anthrax album. I guess at that point it was a side project, and again, kind of a bridge. But Speak English or Die is classic. What came after Among the Living? Let me think. It was, after Among the Living was State of Euphoria. That was another one I loved. That was, I don't know how, but that was in 1988. And I somehow got an advanced bootleg copy. I guess it leaked somehow. A friend of mine had it. I also had Justice for All that in 1988, same year. I guess I got it from the same guy. I don't know where, but they were advanced editions. I don't know if they were leaks, but I had, why do I not remember? State of Euphoria. I loved it. It was, and I still like it now. I think great songs. It maybe doesn't sound quite as robust, quite as good as Among the Living, but for me, I loved all the songs. Be All End All was, let me check the track listing just to go over it one by one. I know Anthrax has kind of denounced that album, maybe similar to what Slayer did with South of Heaven. I like it. I always liked State of Euphoria from the first time I ever heard it, and I still listen to it occasionally. I listen to some songs fairly regularly, but even the full album I listen to sometimes, and I like it. I like it a lot. Out of Sight, Out of Mind, Make Me Laugh. Antisocial, I've mentioned before in a couple of other videos. I'm not a big fan of covers. Antisocial, it was okay. I liked it. It became a crowd favorite. Now It's Dark, Schism, kind of a weird mix. Anthrax was kind of a little bit cartoony now. This is when they were, I guess they started with Among the Living, maybe late into Among the Living touring cycle when they started wearing the colorful shorts and everything. And then with State of Euphoria, they had the cartoon image. I think it was Mort Drucker that drew the image on the back. From Mad Magazine, Mort Drucker that did the back image. But kind of a little bit of a darker album, I think. Now It's Dark, was about Blue Velvet, the movie with Dennis Hopper. I learned a lot. Anthrax got me into a lot of things. They did Apt Pupil, a lot of Stephen King things. Misery in this album, State of Euphoria, Misery Loves Company was from the Stephen King book called Misery, which 2 years after this album came out, they made it into a movie, which I just watched on the weekend. I hadn't seen it for a long time. So Anthrax told me a lot about stuff like that. So yeah, Misery, Now It's Dark. I watched Blue Velvet because of Anthrax. Some I liked, some I didn't. But I know a lot of people, it's maybe a little bit of a maligned album, State of Euphoria. I like it a lot. Maybe if it had had the same production as Among the Living, I maybe would have liked it more. But in terms of songs, I thought it was great. Next. Oh, I have to check. Just a second. Persistence of Time. Of course, Persistence of Time is next. That was 1990. And I liked it a lot. Not quite as much as the two that came before it, State of Euphoria and Among the Living. But I did like it. It was a little bit darker. They went with, in terms of image, they got rid of the kind of cartoony skateboard shorts and, bright colors. They got rid of that. They went with a little bit more black. And I think the overall tone of the album, lyrically and musically too, was a little bit, not just heavier, but darker. Time, Blood, Keep It in the Family is a great Anthrax song. That's, I mean, for me, that's as good as anything Anthrax does. They did a couple of videos for this album. They did In My World, Got the Time, and I don't remember if they did one for Belly of the Beast. I thought the single choices were maybe not the best. I didn't think In My World wasn't the best song, or Belly of the Beast. Got the Time is excellent. As I said, covers out on my favorites. Got the Time is really, really good. I could listen to that song forever. It's good. Gridlock, that was okay. Belly of the Beast, as I said, not my favorite. Hatred is a great song. One Man Stands was not a favorite. Discharge was a really good one. That was a good thrash Anthrax song. So this one, Persistence of Time, I was a little bit on the fence about this one, and they just announced earlier this week that they're doing a 30th? Is it 30? Yeah, 1990, a 30th anniversary of edition of Persistence of... Why do I have such a hard time remembering the album titles? The 30th anniversary edition of Persistence of Time is coming out later this year, maybe in August or something like that. And I guess it'll be remastered in some bonus tracks or something like that. But it was okay. Not my favorite, but not a bad album either. Next was... This was another kind of like Armed and Dangerous, kind of a gap album to fill, kind of just to let everybody know, hey, we're still here. And this is one of the things that I loved about Anthrax, that they did these little EPs or little things to fill the gaps between albums. Which reminds me, I forgot to talk about I'm the Man. So I'll talk a little bit about I'm the Man before I get to this one, because that was another one. I'm the Man was a single or an EP, I guess. It was I'm the Man. They had 2 or 3 different versions of it, and a cover of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, which I loved. I was a big Black Sabbath fan at the time and still am. And it was great to hear Anthrax doing one of my favorite bands, and they did a really good cover. I should say Anthrax was really, really good. I would say at doing covers, Anthrax, maybe Goldfinger for sure, and Metallica, they all did great covers. And so Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, I loved. There was the I'm the Man censored, I'm the Man uncensored, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, a live version of I'm the Man, and then live versions of Caught in a Mosh and I'm the Law. So for me, it was really more like a single. I'm the Man and Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. And I had an I'm the Man t-shirt. I bought it from like Metal Edge magazine or Circus magazine or something like that. Ordered it, sent in the form when you had to do that. And I had an I'm the Man shirt. I had a couple of Anthrax shirts before that, but I had an I'm the Man shirt. So not much to say about I'm the Man, just a kind of an EP, or to me more of a single. But now what I was going to talk about after Persistence of Time came Attack of the Killer Bees, which was excellent. That was an EP of all cover songs, and as I said, covers are not my favorite, but if you put a whole album of it, then I think that's great. And they re-recorded some Anthrax, some SOD. Let me check. Yeah, they did Milk by SOD. What else? Chromatic Death, I think those. Some good covers here. Yeah, Parasite by Kiss. Kiss, as I've said, is probably my favorite band. I've been listening to Kiss since 1975. So they did Parasite, which I loved. God, I listened to that album, that song over and over. Their cover of it, excuse me, Anthrax's cover of it again and again. They did Sex, Pipeline, the covers. They did a reworked version of I'm the Man. Starting Up a Posse, that was a good song. A fun, kind of silly song, but a good one. Bring the Noise, that was, I guess, the most famous song from this album. And I was a pretty big Public Enemy fan at this point, too. I got into Public Enemy a few years before this. So it was cool for me. I would say I like this album better than Persistence of Time overall. Even though it's kind of like, it's a little bit like a Van Halen Diver Down album. Kind of a weird, some new things, but mostly covers, reworks. Attack of the Killer Bees, not Biller Keys, Killer Bees is a very good album. Better than, I would say, better than, I like it more than Fistful of Metal, and I like it more than Persistence of Time, in terms of how much I listen to it. What came after that? Sound of White Noise. Now, everything changed, obviously, with Sound of White Noise. This was, Attack of the Killer Bees was the last album with Joey Belladonna. That was in 1991, I think. And then Joey, I guess, got fired or quit. I think he got fired. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So they got John Bush from Anthrax, and if I remember correctly, Mark Ossegata from Death Angel was in the running to be the new Anthrax singer, which I was all in favor for. I think that would have, for me, made me I was already a huge fan. That would have put me over the top because I was a huge Death Angel fan. And I thought Mark Ossegata's voice, I thought at the time, and I still think now, would have been perfect for Anthrax. He was also very kind of smooth and, a real strong singer like Joey Belladonna, but super powerful. Anyway, it wasn't Mark Ossegata. It ended up being John Bush, who was the new Anthrax singer. I wasn't a big Armored Saint fan. I never was, and I'm still not. So I had kind of mixed feelings about that. Usually this singer is the most important member of the band. He's obviously the voice of the band, and it's what people identify with. So when you change a singer, it's going to polarize a lot of people. I think especially the biggest examples of a new singer really dividing a fan base. Anthrax is down the list, but you could say Bon Scott versus Brian Johnson. I think it's pretty equal between those two. I would say Bon Scott in more recent years. People have maybe shifted their opinion. For sure, David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar, and maybe Dio versus Ozzy in Black Sabbath. And this one, John Bush was, Anthrax wasn't on the same level as, and also I guess, you could say Judas Priest with Ripper Owens, and also Blaze Bayley in Iron Maiden. But so a new singer changes everything. So Sound of White Noise came out, and it was there was a lot of hype for that album. They were on a major label now. They were on, I think they were done with Island, and now they were on Elektra. And so Sound of White Noise came out, and I liked it. To me, it always sounded kind of strange. It was a weird sounding album. It didn't have that Anthrax, not just the vocals, of course, but the guitars especially. It didn't have that Anthrax sound to it, the signature Anthrax sound, but still pretty good album. I don't know if it was better than I was expecting or not as good as I was expecting. Maybe I didn't know what to expect, but I liked it. I think I didn't like it as much as most people. Everybody raves about that album. I don't know if I ever raved about it. I did like it, but not to the extent that some other people did. But I did. Well, I'll talk about that after. But great songs on this album, just a little bit strange sound. Potter's Field, I love Potter's Field. Again, the first single was Only. And just like maybe some of the other Anthrax singles, I never really got into Only. Maybe one of my least favorite songs on Sound of White Noise. Room for One More is a great Anthrax song. Package Rebellion, I didn't really like it that much. Hypro Glow. Invisible was excellent. 1,000 Points of Hate, it was excellent. Black Lodge was another one that was a single that I didn't really like. Again, maybe their Anthrax's choice of singles for me wasn't the best. But there was a good remix of that. I bought a single. It was a remix of Black Lodge, and it had Love Her All I Can by Kiss as a B-side. So that was good. Sodium Pentothal is a great song. Burst, This Is Not an Exit. The last three songs are great. A few on there I don't really care for, but the Anthrax style had changed for sure. So I think this is a fan favorite, maybe not one of my personal favorites. Which leads me to the next one, which I do have. Stomp 442. This is the Forgotten album, but I think the Forgotten Anthrax album. I love it. This was one I think Impact is Imminent by Exodus and Undisputed Attitude by Slayer, that for some reason I had no idea they were coming out until I saw them at the record store. Or that somebody told me about it and it was already out, which was weird because I was a big music fan. I read all the music magazines. I always knew release dates. I knew who was producing the album. I knew, the track listing. This sidled me. It came up out of nowhere for me. Loved it. Maybe that's why, like I said, with Undisputed Attitude, when I talked about Slayer, maybe that's better when you have no expectations. It's just they give it to you and there it is. This album rules. I like every song. Every song on this album is great. Random Acts of Senseless Violence, Fueled, King Size, Riding Shotgun, Perpetual Motion, In a Zone, Nothing, American Pompeii, Drop the Ball, Tester Bear. Which one was it? It was, I think American Pompeii had, to me it always reminded me of Peter Criss's drum solo from Alive 1. It had a little drum break. I think it was American Pompeii or Nothing. I think American Pompeii. I love that little drum break. I don't know if it was a little tribute to Kiss or not. Maybe it was, because I know they're big Kiss fans. Charlie Benante and Scott Ian are for sure. The sound of this album, unlike Sound of White Noise, this album sounded, it was so heavy. Maybe I liked it even better. I was going to say better than Among the Living. Not quite that good. But I loved it. The guitars were very upfront, very heavy. The drums, everything sounded great. This is a very forgotten Anthrax album, I guess because it came out after they had signed to a major label. I think by this point they had been dropped by Elektra. Was this on Elektra? No, it was on Elektra Entertainment Group, division of Warner. I don't know what happened, but I think music was starting to shift at this point too. This was 1995, and people were starting to turn away from metal and listen to Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots and Green Day and Offspring and whatever. But for me, Anthrax was really keeping it alive. I love this album. I'll say it again and again. Excellent album. I'm sure nobody's watching and nobody especially cares about my opinion of Stomp 442. You probably scrolled through to the end or something. But if you're watching this, I'll be the only person who recommends this as a good place to start with Anthrax. Fantastic. Stomp 442. After Stomp 442, now these next two, I would say this run starting with Stomp 442. Excuse me, this was Volume 8, The Threat Is Real. This one I liked even more, I think, than Stomp 442. But again, nobody cared about this. And an interesting thing about this, I remember I bought this the same day as I bought Zoot Suit Ride by Cherry Poppin' Daddies. And I love Cherry Poppin' Daddies. As a matter of fact, I might even do one of these things and go through their whole discography. I really like Cherry Poppin' Daddies, but I won't talk to Anthrax fans about that. Volume 8, The Threat Is Real. I heard on, again, one of these late night metal shows, I heard Inside Out. And I thought, man, Anthrax really sounds like Pantera now. It had that... It had that Pantera groove to it. I think maybe at that point I didn't know, but they were working with Pantera. Dimebag played solos on a couple of songs on this album. I'm not sure. Actually, I think he played on Stomp 442 anyway. Also, Phil Anselmo sings on, what song does he sing on this? Killing Box. He sings kind of a back and forth with John Bush. This is an excellent album. I love it. Again, another very different. I would say this is the most non-Anthrax album, the most experimental album. Harm's Way was kind of not acoustic song, but it had an acoustic intro, and What was the other one? Oh, P&B, Piss and Vinegar was kind of a fun song. Toast to the Extras. Piss and Vinegar was a little bit heavier, but I think Toast to the Extras was a very fun song. Didn't really sound like typical Anthrax. This, to me, sounded like Anthrax having fun. It was really, really good. Stealing from a Thief is the last song. It's longer and heavier. Still some very, very heavy stuff on this. Born Again Idiot has one of the great Anthrax riffs, the middle part, I guess the bridge part. Great riffs on this album. Hogtie, Big Fat, Like a Monster Crossing the Hudson River. You asked me, can I deliver like a monster crossing the Hudson River? I love Volume 8, The Thread is Real. Nobody cared about Anthrax back then. I think more of the timing. Like I said, it wasn't the best time for metal. I loved it. I've loved this album for 22 years. This was 1998. Fantastic. Then, another, I would say, maybe the best, if you could divide the Anthrax catalog into groups of three, my favorite consecutive three would be Stomp 442, Volume 8, and this one, We've Come For You All. Among the Living is my favorite ever, but the three of this would be like Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, or Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, or Overkill, Bomber, Ace of Spades. This is maybe even better than the other two. This might be my second favorite after Among the Living. But again, the first single was Safe Home. That was my least favorite song on this album, and probably still is. It just, I mean, it's okay, but it wasn't one of my favorite. The most amazing thing for me about this album was Roger Daltrey sings on it. He sings on, what song is it? Think about Taking the Music Back. He gives one of the big Won't Get Fooled Again screams, but he also does a little kind of between lines that John Bush sings. Roger Daltrey kind of sings them back. Very heavy album. Superhero is a very heavy, again, kind of like Inside Out. It definitely, you could hear the Pantera influence on Anthrax in Superhero. Refuse to Be Denied. Your Ideology, Always a Lie. It's Jingoistic. I can't remember the lyrics, but that's a good one. Any Place But Here. Maybe Charlie Benante's best drumming ever. The drums are, it's like he's got an extra arm playing that song. I don't know if there was any studio trickery, but I don't think so, because Charlie Benante is a killer drummer. Nobody Knows Anything. Strap It On. Strap It On was a very cool ode to, I guess, kind of 70s and 80s metal. The lyrics are Take Me Back to a Golden Time from 75 to 79. And then in the second verse, it's Take Me Back to a Heavy Time from 85 to 89. Cadillac Rock Box, Dimebag played on that. And Dimebag played on, again, a couple of other things. So, fantastic album. And I see now, I'd kind of forgotten about this. If anybody remembers the enhanced CD, when you would, computers were becoming, this was in 2003, computers were getting quite popular by then. And I guess you put this into your PC and it opened up something I have no idea, and I guess I'll never know because I don't know if anybody has a computer with a CD drive now. But this album rules. So the Anthrax Trinity, for me anyway, those three, Stomp 442, Volume 8, The Thread is Real, and We've Come For You All, are killer Anthrax albums. I gotta check my notes to see what's next. Yeah, The Greater of Two Evils is next. Kind of an easy one to forget. Kind of maybe an unnecessary album, but also kind of cool. And like I said earlier, Anthrax was always good at filling in the gaps. Maybe they could see if they were going to have a long time between albums. They said, all right, we're going to do something, at least get something out there, which was one of the reasons I liked Anthrax, not just for their music, but they were very proficient. They always seemed to work hard and do something. So The Greater of Two Evils was, as you can maybe tell by the title, or if you're watching this, you already know what it is. It was re-recordings of, I don't know how many songs it was, maybe 10 or 12 songs from all of the, I guess the Neil Turbin album, the first one, Fistful of Metal, and the Joey Belladonna era, and they re-recorded them. And with John Bush was on vocals. This came out after We Came For You All. I guess We Came For You All came out in 2003. We've Come For You All came out in 2003. I guess this must come out in 2004, 2005. And if I remember correctly, it was a vote, like an online vote, to vote for the track listing. And then I don't know how real it was, how much they stuck to it. But apparently the songs were all recorded live in the studio. I guess very few, or maybe no overdubs or redos or anything like that. Let me take a look at the track listing. It's very weird for me because I love, as I mentioned, I maybe overall like the John Bush records more than the Joey Belladonna era. But I don't want to hear one singer sing another. It's okay live. I understand, no problem live. But yeah, Metal Thrashing Mad. So Neil Turbin sang the first version on Fistful of Metal. Then Joey Belladonna, they recorded with him on Armed and Dangerous. Then they recorded with John Bush for this one. So yeah, Metal Thrashing Mad, Cotton Amash, AIR, Among the Living, Keep It in the Family, Indians, Madhouse, Panic, I Am the Law, Belly of the Beast, Ifil Niku Fest in NFL, Be All End All, Gung Ho, and then it says Lone Justice was a hidden track. I didn't listen to this album too much. I should. I should go back and listen to it. But I kind of dismissed it at the time. I liked the idea that at least they were doing something and, you know, not putting Anthrax fans in the dark. So I like that. But this album, it didn't really have too much interest for me. So I can't really say too much about it other than I should go back and listen to it again. Now, I guess there were, on a Japanese version, they also had 3 bonus tracks. Anthrax, the song, Lone Justice, and In My World. I'll go listen to it again, I guess. Now, there was a big transition in Anthrax between, that was 2004, and I guess the next album came out in, when was it, 2009? Let me take a look here. And a lot happened in the Anthrax camp. 2011. So yeah, that was 7 years between Anthrax albums. And what happened was this is one of the things that turned me off Anthrax. They had a lot of lineup changes, especially with their singers. So I guess they had asked around 2005, I guess they asked Joey Belladonna to come back. And they were going to do a tour, I think, with Bush and Belladonna, each doing their own songs and something like that. And they brought Dan Spitz back. And maybe at some point they were doing all of Among the Living. And I think it was kind of a failed attempt at a real reunion. They were going to have the original, not original, but the 5 from the classic era back, including Dan Spitz and Joey Belladonna. It didn't last very long. And then, so Belladonna came back, then he was out, then Bush came back. Then I guess, I can't remember. It's very hard to remember Anthrax's history, especially with singers. And then they got a guy called Dan Nelson, which didn't work out at all. If you want to read about Dan Nelson and what happened with him, there are some stories about why he was fired, a couple of different ones. One, I guess, is true. The other one involves a certain act on a tour bus, which I don't believe it's true. I think that was just a rumor. But apparently they recorded an album with him, completely finished it. It was all ready to go. And then there were these incidents. They fired him, so they completely scrapped the album. And the thing, I don't really care about the lineup changes, but the lineup changes, they take up a lot of time. They waste a lot of time. You know, it's not like you can just go and you have one singer one day and you get another singer the next day and you go back into the studio. It takes time. So you were always, around this point, you never knew what was happening with Anthrax. And I'm sure it was very difficult for them, too. I'm not saying anything bad about them. This is, I'm sure, a very difficult and stressful and unenjoyable part of their lives. I'm only saying as a fan. So then Joey Belladonna came back and they re-recorded this album, which was called Worship Music. And from what I understand, the Dan Nelson version exists, but maybe only people in the smallest inner circle have heard it. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I guess I would like to hear it just for curiosity, because I've been an Anthrax fan for 36 years. But from hearing the way he sang live, I don't think I would have liked the album with him too much. But now getting to it. So this was the first album with Joey Belladonna since Persistence of Time in 1990. This is 21 years. And pretty good. I'll start by saying the song In the End is, I would say, as up there with anything Anthrax has done. In the End, which was originally called When the Sun Goes Down, is a fantastic Anthrax album. One thing I didn't like about this, they had these, just looking at the track list here, I remember, and I do have the CD, I couldn't find it. I know for a fact that I bought it, but I can't find it. They had these two, they were called Hymn 1 and Hymn 2. And they were tracks 6 and 9, and they put them right in the middle of the album. And it really divided the album. To me, it kind of broke up the flow. Corrosion of Conformity is guilty of that too. I shouldn't say guilty, that sounds bad. But to me, when you have these little short instrumental pieces, it breaks up the flow of the album and, for me, loses interest. I'm sure other people like it. And then the intro was worship too. So there are officially 13 tracks. If you take away the Hymn 1, Hymn 2, and the worship intro, it's 10 songs on the album, which to me would have been more concise and just a better package. Anyway, Earth on Hell is a good song, very thrashy, like classic Anthrax. The Devil You Know, kind of a good mid-tempo, kind of bouncy, good. I like that song a lot. Fight it a lot. Fight 'Em Till You Can't. There were 2 versions of that. They released it as a single, I think like a year before the album Worship Music came out, and it was a little bit, the intro was different for sure. They had like a radio voice. I'm Alive, that's an okay song. The Giant, Judas Priest, which is not about the band. You would think Anthrax, they're big Judas Priest fans, and you see if they have a song called Judas Priest, you would think that it's about the band Judas Priest, but it's not. Unless there's some really deep hidden message that I completely missed. Crawl, The Constant Revolution, Screams. Yeah, pretty good. I would put this around on the same level as Persistence of Time. Some really, really good songs and a couple that I just didn't really get into. I've been an Anthrax fan at this point for 26 years or something like that, and it's hard, when you like something for 26 years, it's hard to have the same feeling for 26 years. But I can't really say anything bad about this album. I think most fans loved it. I think this was considered a really, really good comeback album by longtime Anthrax fans. It was really good. Which brings us to the next one. Now, this is another one I know that I bought, but I can't find it. And that was from 2015. That was For All Kings. And I would, for me, For All Kings kind of continued in the vein of the one I just talked about, Worship Music. I never got into this album. I don't know why. No, sorry. Well, I missed one. I missed Anthems. All right, before I talk about For All Kings, I'll talk about Anthems. I think Anthems came out. I got to check something. Just a second. All right, I had to check just to be sure. I wasn't sure which one came out first, but it was the covers EP Anthems that came out before For All Kings. So I'll get back to For All Kings. So Anthems was another really good Anthrax. I've said it multiple times. Anthrax was great at these gap albums, filling in little fun things that I guess they could do fairly quickly and easily and with not too much headache. And so they did this, I guess it's considered an EP, although it has eight tracks on it. As I mentioned earlier, Anthrax, Metallica, and Goldfinger, to me, did the best covers. So I was really excited about this. It was a little bit disappointing. The thing that was great about Anthrax covers, and Metallica too, and Goldfinger, was their song selection first, but they whatever song they were covering, whether it was them covering another metal song or covering something totally different, like Anthrax they did a couple of different Police songs. They did Radiohead. They covered the Smiths, U2. They made it sound like an Anthrax song. And to me, these songs on Anthems, on the covers EP or album, they didn't really sound like Anthrax. They sounded more like straight up covers. Again, not bad. Some people, I'm sure, really like that. I like them. What can I say? It's covers. I don't want to talk about it too much. But it was Anthem by Rush. Now, if you want to hear, from me, the definitive cover of Anthem, listen to Anthem by Sacrifice, a great old, very old Toronto thrash metal band. Listen to that. TNT, maybe a little bit predictable. Smokin' by Boston, Keep on Running by Journey. Big Eyes by Cheap Trick. That was maybe my favorite one on this album. That was a good one. Jailbreak by Thin Lizzy. I never liked that song, either the original or the Anthrax one. The cool thing about this was, I think they put different album covers, not different album covers, but they had different artwork for each of the songs, which was, again, one of the cool things that Anthrax did. So it was a covers EP, and, you know, not too much you can say about that. Getting back now to For All Kings. So For All Kings was the last thing Anthrax did. It was in 2015. I feel like I'm missing something, but I don't know. So 2015 it came out, and I don't know what to say about it because I never got into it, and I'm not sure why. I don't think it was bad. Evil Twin, they had released Evil Twin as a single, I think about a long time before, a year or 6 months before. You Gotta Believe is a good song, Monster at the end. For All Kings, it was very melodic. Joey Belladonna was still a great singer at this point. I think still is. His voice is, I think, as good as ever, as strong as ever, very melodic. But a lot of these songs, I don't even remember them. I remember Breathing Lightning was good. Breathing Lightning was, this album was pretty melodic. That's not why I don't think that's why I don't like it. It's not that I don't like it. I didn't get into it. I'm not sure why. I just didn't like the songs. I did see them on this tour. They opened for Iron Maiden in Mexico City when Iron Maiden was on the Book of Souls tours at the beginning of 2016, because For All Kings and Book of Souls came out in 2015. And Anthrax live, that was the last time I saw them. They're still great. They've always been a great live band. I've seen them quite a few times, and they're always good. I just wish they did more headlining shows. They always get opening slots and festivals. Good for them, good for their bank accounts, but for me as a fan, I would rather see them play an hour and a half instead of 50 or 55 minutes. So I really can't say too much about For All Kings because I'm just not that familiar with it. I wish I could say more. I know it's generally considered, I think, among Anthrax fans as being a good album. People didn't, it wasn't like Saint Anger or The Elder or what was the bad Celtic Frost album? Cherry Orchard? No, Cold Lake. It wasn't like one of those albums. I just didn't get into it, but I think most people did. So, as I put this down, that's all I can say about Anthrax. So again, one of the most important bands in my life, Anthrax. They were right at that start when I was a teenager, and really, with some other ones before that, really shaped and formed the kind of music that I really got into, and it's still my favorite, among my favorite kind of music. And so that they'll always have a spot for me in my, you thought I was going to say spot in my heart, but a place in my drawer where I keep all my CDs. But a great band, Anthrax. I think maybe they'll have a new album. I guess they're working on a new album for next year. I don't know if anything's coming out this year, but I hope Anthrax has a new album coming out next year. And I hope they come to Mexico City. I'm due to see them again, and I hope it's a headline show. So that's all for Anthrax. I'm going to do a few more of these. I think I have 3 more in the hopper that I can do. You can maybe guess what bands those are, and that I can do their whole discography. So for the Anthrax discography review, that's all. See ya.